and it's going to say, hey, we're recording, and is there a place for you to click OK? And we're going to start with just a couple of things. First, I always want to say thank you for choosing to become a CASA volunteer advocate. It is such important work. I will share stories of different things from actual cases from our jurisdiction. But one of the ones I like to share is that we had a case, you're going to hear about her, Spitfire, and that's what we call her. And Spitfire was 7 at the time, well, 6 when she started the case, and 7 by the time the case closed. And one of the things that happened is she ended up being, her parents gave up parental rights, and she ended up with her grandfather and grandmother. And he came in, and it was funny because it was on one of the days that I had some volunteers that were observing court for their court observation time to become volunteers. And he just went on and on about how different this child was. This was a child that started, and she had to have intensive therapy 5 days a week. She was having panic attacks. There were so many issues. And then by the time she got them, it took us about a year, a little over a year, to be able to, because they live in a different state, for her to be able to settle in with her grandparents. And she went from being the lowest in her class because she had had schooling issues and she was frustrated and acting out, to not only being the top of her class, but earning all the citizenship awards and everything like that. She was 6 months there, and she didn't have to go to therapy at all anymore. Like, he just went on and on to say how much her future had changed. And he did it in front of everybody right before court, and just to let the volunteers then know. And so I'm going to share that with you now. The little things, it doesn't seem sometimes like what you're doing makes this huge impact, but it really does. And the amazing thing is there are other stories that you will hear during training where it makes generational differences. It's not just this child and this family that you're having a positive influence on. It is their future families and their future families, etc. And so the ripple goes very, very far. So I always want to say thank you. I know I had you all watch that video of that National CASA puts out about the gentleman who discovered that the mom couldn't read and things like that. And that one always gets me too, because it was something really simple that no one, because of everything that was going on, had an opportunity to recognize. Now, what I am going to do is I end up talking a lot, though, like the first week or so, but then I hope to back off from talking and have you all talk more. So the first question I'm going to ask everybody is, did anybody have any problems with that Jot form format for your pre-work?
No.
No. All right, well, that's good. That's what we like to hear. Every once in a while, somebody uses it on Microsoft Edge and it doesn't work so well, but good. That's a new format we just started to use. And so we always, if you have feedback on if something didn't work quite right or there was an issue, please let me know so that we can get it fixed. All right. We will be all chatting in these interaction sections. I want to make sure that we're all aware that, again, I will talk more this first week, but then it's not up to me to talk. That's why I did all those videos. So we're going to get to know each other a little bit. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think about your favorite place. It needs to be somewhere that you've actually lived or visited. And I don't care if you only lived there for a month. That's okay. That still counts if it's your favorite place. And so if you'll just tell us whatever you wish to be called. So I noticed that, Alex, you changed your name like from the Alexandria. And what's funny about that is I have a daughter, my eldest is Alexandra, and she always wanted to be called Alex because she's like, the other name was too long. And we're like, we're sorry, it sounded good at the time. So whatever you want us to call you, just introduce yourself that way and then share what your favorite place is.
Keyboard is so sticky. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. So my name is Alex.
You can call me Alex. I go by Alexandria if you want, but I prefer Alex. And my favorite place that I visited is probably a little town in Germany called Worms, Germany.
Mhm.
It was very quaint, and all of the houses had little gardens in them, and I just really enjoyed the culture there. So I really enjoyed that.
That's awesome. Alex, I will tell you when you go to answer, sometimes we can hear you and sometimes we can't. So you might need to adjust the output volume on your microphone. All right,
Okay.
thanks. Germany is a cool place. Who's next?
Well, my name is Lori, and I go by Lori. My favorite place would be Turner Falls in Davis, Oklahoma. We just went, and it has the largest waterfall in Oklahoma, and you can swim in the water, and it's clear. It's absolutely beautiful. And you can do hiking and camping. They have cabins and like covered wagons and teepees that you can sleep in and rent out. And I thought that was really awesome. So I think that's my favorite place right now.
That's awesome. That does sound really, really exciting. I'm gonna have to look into that. I will definitely remember. You said Turner's Falls, and there's a teeny itty bitty town in Massachusetts called Turner's Falls. They used to have mills and has a lot of waterfalls and rivers and stuff. So I thought, oh my gosh, somebody know who's that where that is. But then you went to Oklahoma, so we'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's about 3.5 hours from Winfield. So, but
That's
it's
not
a good
bad.
trip. Yeah, it's not bad at all. It's really pretty there.
Um,
Well, my name is Cheryl and I go by Cheryl. And I think I like Oregon probably the best. My son lived there for over 10 years. He wants to live there for good, but he can't afford a home out there. But I don't know if it was because he lived there. I feel like I got the full experience of Oregon up and down the coast and all the waterfalls and the hiking and it's different beaches. I said, I'm glad I saw the Atlantic first because the Pacific makes the Atlantic look like a pond. You know, those waves on the Pacific coast, on those lava rocks are just gorgeous.
yeah, yeah. I'm still an East Coast girl. I'm gonna have to differ, just have a different opinion. It doesn't mean I don't agree in some ways, but yeah, I'm an East Coast. I got used to the Atlantic Ocean. My niece lives in California, and I always say, like when we have an ongoing debate. She likes Apple phones, and I prefer Samsung phones. And I always tell her it's because her brain got messed up with the ocean being on the wrong side of the land for her, and she just laughs at me, and she'll make fun of me for something else. So I mean, but yeah,
That
I do know oceans are beautiful. Anybody gets an opportunity to see one, go. It's worth it. But
Well, that's funny because my daughter lives in Connecticut and
see,
that's where my grandchildren are at. And you couldn't, yeah, I mean, you have to drag me there. The only reason I go to the Northeast is because my grandchildren are there. I don't see anything pretty. I don't like it. It's hard it's just amazing how I don't even know why anybody lives there.
yeah, I don't know how anybody can afford to live there, but that's another story. That's my husband and I are both originally from Massachusetts, so I get it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so
She lives in West Hartford, so
oh, I know that airport really well,
yes.
really well. So I want to take this point, breaking the ice and talk about like a little bit of how are we going to work this. So this is during supper time for many people. Don't be afraid to eat supper. Nobody's gonna call Miss Manners and say, oh my goodness, can you believe Lisa kept sipping on her tea the entire training? Because I will tell Miss Manners, yes, I did, because my days typically start at 3 a.m. So I am not at 100%. In my mind at this point, caffeine becomes necessary. Um, but don't be afraid to drink or eat if you need to. We understand that a lot of people may have just gotten home, and by the time supper's ready, you're here. That's okay. It's okay to eat. We also understand that sometimes people have pets and they are children, and all of a sudden this is when they want to talk, come in, whatever. It's okay. One of the things that I often tell people is if you can't deal with a little bit of chaos, this might not be a good fit. If it has to be perfect all the time, this might not be a good fit because that's just not the way, first of all, the world works, but second of all, the world of child welfare. And so, I'm not saying you have to be completely out there, but like, having a little flexibility about certain things. So I want you all to be comfortable. And so that's really important. And the other thing I want us to do, and I think I mentioned it, I might not have at this point because, again, end of the day, I want to talk about questions. So there are times that I have a question, and there are times that I'm worried I'm going to forget that question. I'm going to forget to ask that question unless I keep it in my mind. But if I keep it in my mind, it means I have to just stop listening. Or there are times where I'm like, well, I don't want to interrupt. So I hold the question, then I forget the question, and then the question pops back. So I am okay for questions to be asked at any point in time. And I know that sometimes people will, when we're in Zoom or one of the other video services that we've used, they'll send like a message. And I'll be honest, I have 2 screens. I have lots of windows up on lots of screens all at the same time. If I miss it, it's okay to point it out. Just because I may miss the notification popping up that something like that may happen. I don't want you to forget your question. I want to answer it. Now, I will maybe sometimes say, hold that thought because we're about to talk about that in just a minute or two. Or we're going to get into that in more depth next week. Hold that question. Typically that doesn't happen, but if it did, I just want you to know I'll acknowledge your question, but then we'll answer it at a different point in time. The other thing is that jot format. I know I say it in all of them, but I do want to emphasize again, it's okay to email me a question when you're going through the training. Now, what I will tell you is it's the middle of summer for this class. And so I have some Fridays off. I have some Mondays off. I might be traveling to here. I might have court hearings all day. So it might take me a day or two to be able to answer the email. If I'm actually out of the office, not at like court or something normal, a lot of times I put an out of office reply up. It doesn't mean that I won't see it. Sometimes it means I won't see it for a day or two, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that it's still okay to do that. All right. If it is a crucial, oh my goodness, I have to know it right now question, at the bottom of my email, the signature, it has my work cell number on there. It is okay to text that. I will get to the text as quickly as possible. They get priority over emails and things like that. The only thing is, if you do it the first time, let me know who you are, because otherwise it's just a random text from a random number. I don't take everybody's information. So, and then that'll give me context. So that's how we're going to handle questions for the training. And then one of the things I like to do is to kind of go over some of the expectations. And really that leads into something we call group agreements or group norms. And these are items that we as a group are going to decide on together. And we're going to chat about them for a minute. Sometimes in the past, it is just be respectful, make sure you're listening to other people, different things. So I want everybody to just take a minute, think about what we should have our group agreement be, how we're going to interact together. And then we'll go ahead and we're going to make a list. And feel free when you come up with one, if you come up with something, to go ahead, unmute, just say it.
Did you want us to go ahead and start?
Yeah, anytime you're ready.
Okay, I was thinking to be thoughtful, considerate, and open-minded.
Okay, those are great. Those are great. Cheryl or Alex?
Oh, along the same lines that no question is a dumb question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would rather make sure that you are clear, because sometimes it may seem not as big of a question, but if you're struggling, I don't want you to struggle. So I would agree. Alex, do you have any for us?
I agree with, can you hear me?
Yes, so much
Okay,
better. Thank you.
sweet. I switched out from my headphones. I agree with open-mindedness. As I'm learning, I tend to learn by repeating things that we learn. And so, you know, if I tend to bring up things we've already spoken about, that might happen. So, yeah.
And that's a really good way to kind of put it together in your mind. Sometimes you have to work through something a couple of times and see how the pieces fit. That is completely acceptable too. All right, one of the things that I will tell you is I try really hard to respect your time, and so I typically will start on time and I try not to end. When it comes to time, I will also say that it shouldn't take us 2.5 hours. I'm thinking it's an hour and a half to 2 hours on these sessions, based on how many questions you have and how the discussion goes. I don't want to, for the sake of, oh my goodness, they're asking this question at 2 minutes of, 2 minutes of 8, and I said I'm going to keep it to 2 hours. And it's a really important question that would be really helpful. I don't want to rush through that discussion, which is why I always tell people a longer amount of time for you to allot. We will pretty much, depending on questions, only go about an hour and a half to 2 hours each week. So, anybody have anything else? All right, well then we will continue on. There we go. So what I'm going to do is we're going to practice, because some of the things that we're going to do are going to be, this is supposed to be a more interactive session, not a Lisa Chats session. So what I'm going to do is we're going to lot to poll, because what I found is even people that are very familiar with Zoom sometimes forget how to do things. So there they are. I am going to launch a poll right now, and I'll wait for everybody to go ahead and answer. So it looks like everybody's on a computer or a tablet of some sort, but if not, you may just have to maneuver your screen. I don't know how to do it on the phone. I know Snow on the computer, it pops up. 2 and 3. So everybody has answered. All right, and end it. And now what you should see on the screen is you should see the results. So we have one morning person, one afternoon person, one night to late night person, and I think we've already established I'm the super early morning person. What's funny about this is this fits how my children are or were when they were little. They're all adults now, so but it's kind of funny. So it's just a fun way of like, hey, when is your best time of day? So that's how we'll do them. And now you should not see that poll anymore or the results. It should have popped off. If it doesn't, feel free to close it out. All right, now I'm going to just ask this question first. Is there anyone here who's not as familiar with Zoom? Okay, that's pretty good. Does anybody not know how to do a breakout room in Zoom?
I'm not for sure I do.
Okay, so we're gonna try a breakout room, and what I'm going to tell you is, typically when I put somebody in a breakout room, there'll be a timer that, well, I'll go, okay, I'll say, hey, I'm gonna give you 5 minutes, and you guys would go into the breakout room, which we'll practice in a second. And then at 4 minutes, I'm going to on my end, I hit a button that tells you that you got 1 minute left. If you're done when that happens, feel free to come back by exiting the room. Or if you don't know how to do that, or if you're on a phone where it's more challenging, then you can just wait till time's up and then come back. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to set up for the breakout room. And create. Okay, so you're all going to have a button that says that you've been invited to join. Go ahead and join. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close all the rooms. So when you see that, feel free to come back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Did you hear me announce everything okay? Okay, so you didn't hear it. All right, interesting, because it was supposed to tell you, hey, I'm going to close out the room now. But if you didn't hear it, I'll figure out what happened. Okay, so we tried a breakout room. I love to, on this first time, just kind of go over, this is how the technology is going to work now that you're in your setups, because you never know. I've had people who've used Zoom before, but they've never done a breakout room, or they've never done a poll question or things like that. So I also have typically people that have never done Zoom before. All right, so our schedule for this particular training. Typically our weeks are going to begin on a Tuesday. That's how we call it, whatever the interactive session is, because we have 6 interactive sessions. You will get pre-work. I will either send it out tonight or I will send it out first thing tomorrow morning. And that's going to be pretty typical of each week, depending on how the week goes. I'll either send it out within a half hour of the training that night or first thing in the morning on Wednesday morning before I go to court. And that will have the link to the new training that has everything that you need to do for pre-work the next work. Typically, you just need to finish that pre-work, whether there's something that needs to be emailed to me in addition to the job form or the video set that you do. Or if it's most of the time, it's just the job form that you have to do. I do try and ask that you try and get it all done by Sunday night, if at all possible. Now, I understand life can get crazy and that might not happen. The absolute deadline for every week except for the final week is Tuesday morning. That final week, there are some things that that you need to email to me that I actually have to do some things with for that training. So just kind of the goal is that if you could try and have it done by Sunday night, then I can look over everything. And if I see people are having issues, the same issue, then I know I want to emphasize that on Tuesday night. If I see that you guys have got it, and then I might move something around and we might do an extra exercise or something more interactive on the Tuesday. So I kind of set up what we're doing on the Tuesday based on how all that pre-work comes in. So the pre-work really does have to be completed every week. So one of the things for your training, I know not everybody is from my program. There are other programs that are represented as well, and I understand, and that is perfectly fine. One of the things is that we are all required in the state of Kansas to have the same requirements, and some of those are met by that pre-work, and some of those are met by us meeting together, and then some of the things are met by you in your local program. You'll have to do your background checks through your local program. You'll have to do your court observation through your local program. When I go over and teach about court reports and monthly reports and different things like that, I'm going to use our forums. Now, they're going to look different. There may be some additional things in mine, or we might not have everything that your program uses. That's one of the things that you'll have to meet with your local program if you're not with me, to go ahead and have them train you on it specifically. Now, one of the reasons why we can do that is because for the most part, we're all giving the same information. Some give a little more, some give a little less, depending on the program, but it's all the same information and the same reasoning. And so therefore it's perfectly good to do it that way. But that's something that you have to find out about your local program. So, all right. And then, so look for that email that you should get from me either that Tuesday night or that Wednesday morning. Now, sometimes I'm going to send out items and I'm going to say, hey, I want you to print this, but don't read it. That's because we're going to be doing some interactive case studies, and it's just easier for a lot of people to print them out versus try and read them on the screen as we go. That option will be there. So if you have to do it that way, that's okay. My understanding is now that fewer and fewer households actually have a printer in them. So if you really want it in paper, you can always go to your local program, come to our office, and we will print it out for you. But sometimes I'll ask you to print it and not read it. Other times I'll ask you to read it through. So just pay attention. That's always in the email. All right. So now today we're going to actually jump into a little bit skills and competencies, volunteer dilemmas. We're going to talk a little bit more about understanding abuse and neglect. And then we're actually going to start working a case and talk about pre-work. So we're going to actually jump right in there and get going. Okay, so I know that the laws were in the handouts and there was some discussion that I gave about other laws. What I want for everybody to answer, so think carefully, is these are obviously some of the key laws up until about 2015. Since 2015, we've had the Indian Child Welfare Act has been updated a couple of times. We also had the Federal Family First legislation since then. We've also had, what's the other one? FERPA come in since then, and some other ones, but predominantly these are the older ones. When you were learning about the laws and the history of child welfare, what struck you the most? What was the most surprising thing that you found when you were reading and learning about them?
Well, I think I'm probably the oldest one here, and I was surprised that there wasn't something before 1974.
So I doubt you're the oldest one. I'm pretty sure I'm older than you are, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But yes, that is really surprising because I was already up running around and doing stuff when 1974 happened. So
Exactly.
so I get that. Yeah, it's really, really recent. It's literally within my lifetime. Alex, Lori, what else? What struck you all?
I was gonna say something similar just because of the story we read about the young girl. I can't remember her name, but that had happened, years and years and years and years before 1974. And so to know that this was, not only a topic that was prevalent in communities, but that, elected officials and prominent members of the community knew about it as well. And so to think that it still took that long for it to be enacted. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot that had to change in the mindset of the community before, and it does. Things don't happen quickly. But it had been going on for quite some time. Lori, how about you?
I was kind of shocked by some of this, like statistics that they were quoting, like 90% of the children under the age of 1 die from like abuse and neglect.
Mhm. Yeah, the statistics are startling. I was asked at one point to help an organization, and was involved in it as well. And they asked me if I would help them put some protections together to protect kids, because it just all of a sudden they heard that, things had happened in another state, and they're like, well, we want to make sure that nothing like that happens here. And when I started to go through with the leadership and started to share some of this stuff, their jaws dropped. They're like, that still happens, that's a thing, and I still, when I do conversations in the community, I will almost always have a person go, child abuse still happens. Yes, it does. Unfortunately, it is still ongoing. One of the biggest things that I will share that others are surprised at is that there were laws against animal abuse before there were laws to protect against child abuse. That at one point in time, we valued our children, our animals, more than our children. That typically is another one that strikes a lot of people.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about competencies. So again, I know we went over this. There's certain times that I will emphasize certain things, especially in the beginning, because there's a lot coming at you all at once. We have to lay that foundation. Over the course of this training, we are going to work on building competency in the CASA role, understanding what we can and cannot do. Communication, how best to communicate. How should we communicate? With whom should we communicate? Cultural competence, sound judgment. And I don't mean like, oh, the radio's too loud and turn that down. My husband likes to make that joke. If you ever he's not here today, but whenever he ever walks by and I'm doing that, he's like, oh, that's when you turn the volume down because it's too loud. Initiative. I will tell you that there's a lot that we do in the training and everything, but you have to be someone that has some initiative to go and make the phone calls and do it, because we as staff are not going to be like, hey, did you do this? Hey, did you do this? Hey, did you do this? We will be the people that say, hey, you forgot to send your monthly report in on time. Could you get that to me? And we are going to look at it and make sure you've had face-to-face contact with the child and things, but not, did you call this person? Did you call this person? Did you call this person? That's going to be up to you. Obviously, if you have a question, we're here to help and support, but we'll talk more about that. Foundations of knowledge. There's a lot to learn in the child welfare system. And I will tell you, there is just as much to learn now as when I started with this particular CASA program in 2015. Because things change, we learn more, we understand more. And so there's always something new, nuances that we weren't aware of before that we become aware of. Laws change, different things, practices, best practices change. So there's always a foundation of knowledge that we want to have, and then we build on that from there. And then self-care, taking care of yourself is important. And we're going to go through this and talk about that later. Now, take a second. I want everybody to think, what do you think your strongest one is right now? And what do you think your weakest one is right now? Knowing that we're going to be building competency, so there's nothing wrong with being weak in one of these areas right
I can go. I feel like my strongest one would be communication. Just because I'm not afraid of asking questions and I love learning and talking to people and finding out more. But I feel like my weakest one could be foundations of knowledge. I don't come from a social work background, even though I've worked in kind of the social work nonprofit world for a while.
now.
So I feel like I might have those foundations of knowledge, but not as much as I would want. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so.
Nothing wrong with that. We are not going to denigrate the type A personalities in the group. I promise.
I would say mine would be, my strongest would be communication, and then kind of a little iffy about some of the cultural competence, just because there's just so much diversity when it comes to people's backgrounds, the way that they were raised, just their way of doing things. I may not always know, and so that always interests me, as well as the foundations of knowledge. Like I have case management experience, but it's different. It's with children and then incarcerated individuals, and so this is kind of going to be I'm really excited for this.
Good, good. Cultural competence is huge. We will start working on that and then we will build on that throughout. So we will definitely touch on it, but I don't want you to think that this is going to be an all-inclusive, you check the box, you're never going to have to address it again. That's not how this works. In fact, you'll hear me talk about like cultures and subcultures and, because there are so many and you might have a piece of this subculture and a piece of this subculture and it basically creates its own subculture and things like that. But we will address a lot and things to consider and where to find information and how to find information and what's valuable and what's not valuable and things like that with regard to sources. I know that this is going to shock everybody. Okay. Hear the sarcasm, please. But the internet is not always right. Just say. But it can start to help you sometimes with finding answers and like, if you're looking for something locally, well, that can possibly help lead you in the right direction. Things like that. So that's awesome. How about you, Miss?
Well, I would like to think I'm good at communication, but I laugh when I'm nervous, and it is my whole life. I have like kind of gotten in trouble for that. I mean, and my whole family does it. When my father died, my sisters and brother and I were laughing so hard in the hearse going to the cemetery. My brother-in-laws were like, there's something wrong with you guys, but that's just what we do when we're nervous. And so that comes across wrong to people. And I try to warn them. Sometimes I say, I get nervous, I may laugh. That doesn't mean I'm laughing at you, So definitely need to work on that. I feel like I have sound judgment, but then I also know I need to work on that. I was a nurse. I'm a nurse for 40 years and literally was standing in a room with a 12-year-old girl and her 16-year-old boyfriend, and they're in bed. And the stepfather's sitting right there, and she's like answering the questions and said, yeah, we're sexually active. And I'm just running through the questions. And then when the doctor comes in, she's like, we have to hotline this. And I'm like standing there thinking, but the parent is right here. This is who she lives with. And it was like, okay, sound judgment. She's 12. But for some reason, I'm thinking if the parents know,
Yeah. Yeah.
So lots to learn.
and that's what we're here to do. That's why the same thing when I put in the email, and hopefully it came across that when I did that evaluation before you started training, I don't care if you put zeros on everything or whatever the lowest one is. And
Okay.
I think it's the low is the least and the highest.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in those numbers. In fact, I don't even look at those numbers. I don't look at those numbers, and then I don't look at the ones at the end. The one at the end only has like 10 questions or 5 questions. So don't panic. There's not like another super long one at the end. But we have to start somewhere, and every situation, the problem with sound judgment is every situation has so many nuances. It's really challenging. Now, the other thing I will tell you is I don't ask you all to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. So I will say that I am probably pretty competent in the CASA role. I would hope I am. I've been the director of a program for several years now, been doing this for a while, and then previously worked with other child-oriented organizations and nonprofits for a couple of decades. So I'm pretty confident in the CASA role. But what I will tell you is I absolutely still, I have improved, but I still stink at self-care. Like I'm really not good at that. Really still. I take measures. I have made great progress. My friends tease me, some of the other directors tease me because like I just really admit it right from the beginning. I'm like, yep, this is where this is not, nope. So when I ask you a question, a lot of times I'll wait and then I'm going to answer it too, because I want you to know that like I'm not perfect just because I'm the one facilitating. Doesn't make me perfect. Doesn't mean I know all the answers. I still go to people too. And sometimes I'll go to somebody who doesn't have as much experience because I just want that second opinion. So I don't want you to be intimidated because I make mistakes too. I make them all the time. I guess the only difference is I own them. I'm like, I'm okay with it. I can make a mistake. It can be on me this time. So, all right. So one of the things that I did is I went over kind of like our role as the CASA volunteer versus what a caseworker does. I like to start with that pretty quickly right in the beginning because it gets really confusing sometimes in real life. You know, on paper, it's super easy to look, oh, that's this person's responsibility and that's what this person's supposed to be doing. But in real life, it's not always so clear cut. And so I want to make sure that we're going to emphasize that now. And how we're going to do that is we are going to talk about some dilemmas and see how that works and have a discussion. So what I will tell you is I'm about to put up a dilemma. If I have a volunteer to read it, wonderful. If you're all comfortable and you just want to read it silently, then tell me that. And then here's my thing. After we read it, don't say anything. Just let me know that we finished. And I'm going to launch a poll and you guys are going to vote anonymously. That way there's no pressure of like, oh my gosh, it was the first week and Lisa was asking all these questions and I got them all wrong. Well, first of all, there's not a lot of right and wrong answers in these. Second of all, I hang out with too many lawyers who can argue one thing and then argue the exact opposite in the next case 5 minutes later. In fact, I will tell you, it is a skill set that is unbelievable to be able to go from one extreme to the other that quickly. I've sat in where the lawyer wanted to try and to take the CASA report apart because it was not favorable to the parent that he was representing, and as an individual he knew that and he agreed with everything that was in the court report. Okay, but he had to argue, well, they're a volunteer, you know, I don't know how much training they've had, and then in the very next case, so like he did it to the point I started to get aggravated in there. I'm like, nope, he's just arguing for his client. He's arguing for his client. The next case, he was the guardian ad litem, and he's like, CASA is the best thing since sliced bread. They're amazing. They're volunteers. They're completely independent. They're not tied to the system. And I was like, I needed a minute between those. Okay. I just needed a second before you threw me off. So understand, I'm not going to condemn anybody who picks something different. I can argue probably most of the cases one way or another. There will be a couple of things in here that I will say, hey, okay, there are some rules about this just to remind you. I was trying to say there's something else that was on the tip of my brain. Oh, that's it. When I talked about that story just then, and you know, that attorney and I get along really well. We're kind of friendly and stuff. And he and his wife are really great people. Got to remember, attorneys, even though they push really hard for their client, that's their job. Don't take it personal. However, I'm also going to tell you like it is. Like I just did. You'll occasionally have an attorney that's going to try and argue against maybe a recommendation you make or something like that, because that's how they're trying to do the best for their client. So if you're looking for this training to be like, it's going to be all butterflies and rainbows and it's perfectly green and everything is wonderful. Unfortunately, that's not the reality, but it's not all gray and dismal either. I want to give you an accurate and honest assessment of kind of some of the things you're going to face and some of the things you'll appraise for yourself and some of the things that you will discover. And I don't want to paint a picture that's inaccurate. Accuracy is like my number one thing, which is why sometimes I don't always communicate really well, because I am super into the detail being perfectly correct. And so I stage it too much, and that's okay. I recognize that in myself. So when you ask me a question, I am going to give you an honest answer, even if it's not the pretty answer. All right, everybody ready? Here's our first dilemma. Do I have a volunteer to read? Or do you want to read it all on your own? I know you guys are always shy the first week. Go ahead and read it on your own, but I will need to just, if you all let me know when everybody's done reading, please.
I'm done.
Okay, everybody's done? All right. I'm gonna launch a poll. Told you we were gonna use them. All right. Launch it. All right, go ahead. Just waiting on one more person. And there we are. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. So, first thing, we'll tackle the milkshake. You all said no. You guys were all completely in agreement with no on the milkshake. But there was a split decision. There were 2 no's on the prescriptions and 1 yes. So we're going to stop and let's look at this. Why? Okay, I don't care what you said in particular. Why would someone say yes, or why would someone say no to picking up the prescription?
See, my thing, I'm probably thinking more like a nurse. She needs it. There's no money involved. And so it's taking care of the child.
Okay. Okay.
And I was just thinking between the difference between social worker and CASA, and thinking that I don't know if the word was like direct service or not, but that might be a direct service to like pick up a medication. But potentially like a milkshake, if it's approved with the family and with like within the amount of money you're allowed to spend as a CASA, that could be something that you could get maybe, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Lori, did you have anything to add?
You know, with the mild painkillers and the antibiotics, I think I would be a little concerned about picking them up and, you
Mhm.
know, someone possibly saying that they weren't distributed to the child, you know,
Mhm.
like it didn't make it there. Like, for example, like maybe this person kept it. So I think it might just be a little bit of a liability.
Mhm.
Or even if, you know, when you go and pick up the prescriptions and if you have questions, you can ask them about how to administer it properly. And then
Right.
you would have to be the liaison between the person handing out the medication and who the intended recipient is. And then that could be a sticky situation as well.
So you guys are pointing out amazing reasons why typically my recommendation, if asked by a volunteer, and here's the deal, you don't have to make this decision on your own. It's okay to run this by your CASA staff and get their second opinion. This is why when I brought this dilemma to my program attorney, I'm like, so is there a legal aspect? And legally, you're signing for that prescription, which makes you responsible.
Yeah.
And so my program attorney is like, Lisa, don't ever let our volunteers do. And I was like, I don't think any of ours would, but that's why there's some legal ramifications involved. And you're right. What happens if somebody then claims that you picked it up, but you didn't give it to them? Or what if they got the medication wrong? Or what if you didn't ask because you didn't know about an allergy? Or what if they told you some medical information? Now you are able to get that because of the judicial counsel form. You have access, but that's private medical information. They're not supposed to necessarily hand that out to anybody. And if there's a potential for a conflict because of another medication, that may pop up on there, and then you're having to make decisions. So it's one of the reasons why we would recommend against it. If it makes you feel any better, Cheryl, I have my middle child is an RN. And my husband was medical in the military, and he used to run an emergency department, and both of them would have picked it up too. So like, I get it. It's the medical people.
It is.
The medical people trying to give out the medicines. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then yeah. And
Yeah,
then
she's got to have those antibiotics. You got to get them started.
I know, because you have to take them. You have to take them every day, even if you feel better. I might have heard that once or twice. Raising my children, maybe.
Yep, maybe.
Okay, I totally did, but as for the milkshake, I kind of like the fact that you were all in agreement. No, and I'm going to talk about it a couple of things. First of all, there is a limit on the amount of money that you can spend each year on your CASA Child. I will say check with your program. For my particular program, it's limited to $50. Now, that's something our board needs to relook at, because they might make it 75 for a year just because the prices of everything are going up so much. But the idea is that you could get something tiny for them for their birthday, and then around the holiday season at the end of the year, or a graduation gift or something, but they would be small. Now, one of the things that I will tell you is sometimes I find ways around that. When I was seeing Spitfire, she was super into art. I talked about Spitfire earlier. She was 7 and she was super into art. So I brought art stuff with me. I was really clear when I came, and I was like, so I'm going to bring this for us to do sometimes together, but then I'll take it home so it doesn't get lost. And that way I have it if I have to meet with another child. And she was totally cool with that. As long as you lay it out in advance, she was like, okay. So then I kind of bought it for her, but because I didn't give it to her, it didn't count against my $50, if that makes sense. So a couple of things. Milkshakes. So I don't know here if there's anybody who's never had a milkshake, but they typically give you these tiny straws and this thick milkshake, and you're trying to suck that up. And every time one of my children or myself has had dental work, they don't want you to use a straw for a while or anything like that. And then the other thing is they typically don't want you to have dairy a lot right after they pull teeth, just because it produces a lot of your nose running and the mucus and different things like that, and they don't want to have that kind of stuff. So other things to consider, we don't know if maybe, okay, the girl's name is Susan. We don't know if Susan might be lactose intolerant, or maybe she's diabetic and we weren't aware of that yet. So there's a lot of nuances, and yes, you could have potentially answered. The other concern I have with this one is the fact that this is your first visit. I recommend against setting the precedent that you're going to bring her something every time you go there. I didn't bring the artwork with me on my first visit to Spitfire. I just kind of brought myself. and we chatted and different things. I was a couple of sessions in before I did that. I don't want to set the expectation where they're going to be expecting you're going to take them out to eat, or you're going to be bringing them a milkshake, or you're going to give them a gift every time. So those are some of the things. All right. Here is our next dilemma. If y'all want to just go ahead and let me know when you're done reading.
I'm done.
Perfect. Okay, so now that everybody's done, I'm gonna launch another poll, of course. There you go. Y'all are unanimous tonight on some of these questions. Good for you. The only one we were completely split on was the first one of what our favorite time of day is. So that was the only one. But other than that, okay. So couple of things here. You are all correct. This one does have a definitive answer. Like I said, some of the questions will. This is one that does. The dilemma here for so many is they don't want, they're trying to, you build rapport so that you can build trust, so that you can have open communication, and what happens is you're afraid that if you share something, you know, that's going to destroy that trust and that rapport, and it can cause problems. And you know what? That may happen at some point. However, everything that we do is focused on the best interest of the child. It is not the best interest of the children that this secret is kept. Now, I do want to talk about a couple of other things with this. Number one, when we have 4 children, typically, unless it's an unusual situation, if we had a single mom and she's even expressed that she's got some concerns, it would for sure not, we would for sure not reintegrate all 4 children with mom right at the beginning. We might do them 1 at a time. We might do them 2 at a time, you know, like, so 1 or 2 children go back, then it kind of relaxes for a minute. You know, you have maybe a month, then everything kind of settles down. Okay, we got a routine, we're handling it, and then you move the next set or the next child over. I have seen cases where there are 4 children. I've seen cases where there are more than 4 children, and we've stair-stepped them back because we want the reintegration with the family to be successful. We do not want it to overwhelm that parent or those parents. And I know that this is going to sound completely crazy, but pinky swear is not held up in court of law. You can't tell the judge, but I did a pinky swear, so I can't tell you. Yeah, it's not legal in a court of law, you know. And I know that I'm kind of making fun of the pinky swear because little kids think it's like that's it. Even my grandbabies, well, they're not really babies anymore. Even my grandchildren, when they were little, would be like, pinky swear. I'm like, okay, well, we'll have to see. Now, the other thing about this that we will touch on more is the fact that we need to be really upfront, and we'll talk more about this next week, about what we can and can't share, what we keep, how we keep things confidential, because there's a difference between things being confidential within the case and outside of the case. Outside of the case, we're not sharing any information ever, even if you're no longer, you leave CASA program, you retire from it, 20 years from now, whatnot, you still can't talk about your cases ever. However, within the case, we're gathering information to share with the judge, and therefore we have to be able to share that important information. Now, if it's the fact that if mom wants to have a pinky swear that she's gonna dye her hair blue and wants to surprise her baby boy because it's his favorite color and she wants to do it for his birthday, that's not something that needs to make it into the court report. That's okay to pinky swear and like hold that, but you're gonna have to sound judgment on that one. So, but yeah, I always think it's funny, pinky swear. All right, there we go. Okay, so I want to talk briefly, just as a reminder, when recognizing child abuse and neglect, I want to remind us, first of all, your job is not to determine the abuse or neglect. The court decides if the child has been abused or neglected. That's what happens in that adjudication that we talked about, whether or not they are a child in need of care. The other thing is, your job is not to try and find out what happened. Like, who's at fault for what happened. You're not the investigator. This is not a criminal case where you're the investigator. So I always want to make sure that people are aware of that. That's not why we're involved. That's not why we're gathering information. Sure, it might have an impact. If you have two parents and one of them really did the physical abuse or the sexual abuse, obviously we need to protect the child. So we do have to kind of figure out a little bit more information on who do we protect the child from. But it's coming from what's the best interest of the child, not because we're trying to, yeah, you guys won't know that one. I was gonna say not be who Columbo is, but whoever, we're not the investigator. Okay, I told you. Okay. For those of you who don't know what that is, you can look it up later. So
Does Columbo have like a sandwich? Is that part of his?
he
his content?
has like a beige trench coat, and he was a super guy. It was a television show, and he was
And the cigar.
yeah, and he had
Okay.
and he would ask the stupidest questions, and so he was very not intimidating, and that style of Columbo was amazing. But he was brilliant, and what people didn't realize is in the what seemed like ridiculous questions, he would be able to put the crime together and figure out who done it.
Mm.
So very old show. If you get an opportunity to watch it, like find it on the internet, watch one. They were fun. Yeah, I froze because I was like, I can't think of a more modern one. That's the one that came to mind. But
It's Elsbeth now. Have you
it?
seen? Yeah, Elsbeth. She acts she's as stupid as he was.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But that shtick worked for him because he became very not intimidating. So
Right.
people were comfortable, and they're like, oh, he doesn't even have a clue what's going on. He's like soaking it up. We do want to recognize what the signs of abuse and neglect are, so that we can help advocate, because there are a lot of symptoms. And on that note, it's not on the slide, but one of the things that you'll find is once you build that rapport and trust with the child, you could be 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9 months into a case, and then all of a sudden the child will reveal something that hasn't happened before, or that they haven't talked about before, and you realize it's in that, okay, we may have another abuse here, or we may have something else. A lot of times domestic violence, they'll talk about how they were physically abused more, or that this happened, or maybe they were neglected or locked up in their room, or beaten with a belt, or whatever it is. They weren't comfortable sharing that with anybody, but now they're comfortable sharing that with you. So it's not uncommon for us to uncover more things later on as trust is built. The biggest thing is that child abuse can be physical, sexual, emotional, or it could be neglect. Neglect is a form of abuse. A lot of times people talk about child abuse and neglect as if they're two different things. Neglect is a form of child abuse. Now, neglect can be emotional neglect, physical neglect, educational neglect. A lot of counties across the state of Kansas, truancy cases become neglect cases also if they're under the right circumstances. A truancy case can become a neglect case because they're being educationally neglected. So again, medical neglect, I had another case, so you're going to hear about this one too. I had another case where I had a 6-month-old and she had a type of fracture. Cheryl will know exactly what I'm talking about. She had a spiral fracture at 6 months of age. And I will tell you, it is physically impossible, even with what is it, osteoimperfecta, which is basically what we call brittle bone disease in the real world.
Right.
Even with that, for her to have broken and to have done a spiral fracture, that is a definite, for a 6-month-old who can't really do much of anything, maybe starting to crawl, there's just no way she could have done that. But her parents did not bring her to the doctor's office for a couple of weeks. And so one of the things they were looking at was that medical neglect, because the child and the way it was and the bruises and everything that were still there, they knew that it had to be hurting the baby. So there had to be some kind of outcry and stuff. So there are a lot of different forms, and that's why we went through so many things, and it's not fun to read, but it's really important to be aware as you go through of the signs. Okay, everybody ready to start working a case? All right, let's go. No, might need a little bit more first, right? Okay.
Right.
So the first part of what we're going to do in working a case is we're going to talk about the court report. So a couple of things about the court report. This is the key, essential, number one thing of what we do. And why is that? Because this is how we present everything that we've learned about the case, all our recommendations. This is how we present that information to the judge and the court and all those involved. This is the core essence of what we do. It is also a visible documentation of your involvement in the case, what you've been able to find out and discern and learn about the family. And that can be positive and negative. We always want to make sure we have some positives in there too. I will tell you, I have sat in many courtrooms in many counties, and I have talked to judges and attorneys all over the state of Kansas, as well as other states across the nation. And it doesn't matter if it's a judge out of Texas or an attorney out of Georgia, they all tell me the same thing. And that is that they absolutely rely on these reports to make informed decisions about what's going on and what is the best for that family and that child. These reports have a lot of weight in the courtroom. Now, as a side note, court reports are the one thing that every CASA program across the nation has in common. Believe it or not, CASA is different. In some states, we're not even called CASAs, we're called GALs. I know I talked about that, but one of the key things that we all have in common, other than having to go through all the background checks and all the trainings and things like that, because this is a national CASA training, is that these court reports are that crucial in everything, and because this is how we present all the information. Now, I will tell you, this is written for my program. I will tell you that everybody but your program, Cheryl, I don't know what Krista's timeline is, but every other program that I've done training for, your court report is due 10 business days before every court hearing. And there is a court report for every hearing. Oh my goodness. At least it's clicking on our mouse again. So now sometimes it doesn't have to be a formal court report. Sometimes it might be an addendum. We'll talk more about that later. But They are due, and that is typically 10 business days because that gives us you time to submit it. That gives us a time to review, ask questions, different things like that. We might, sometimes I'll want to ask if you, because I'll read it and I'll be like, did you mean this or did you mean this? And then maybe make a suggestion on how to reword it a little bit so that you're really understanding exactly, you know, that judge and those in the courtroom understand exactly what you were trying to say. All right. Yep, my mouse is super sensitive. I think my husband turned the spinny thing on. That's never a good day for me. Okay, so the key elements of a court report. There's the identifying information, tells us what case we're working on, what child the court report's for, etc. The brief reason for removal. Now, not all children, got into this earlier with the federal family first. Sometimes we try, if at all possible, unless there is a safety issue, then we try to let the child remain at home if at all possible with a safety plan in place. So it might not be a reason for removal. Sorry, National CASA, I'm picking on their slide a little bit, but it might be the reason for the start of a case is another way to think of it. The reason why the case started. And that doesn't change throughout it, but it is a reminder on every court report because it's a really good reminder for us all, like this is how the case started. It might turn into something else later on, but this is how the case started. So this was our initial issue that we were trying to help this family fix, for lack of a better word. Visit information. Some of the programs actually require you to do part of what you'll also do in your monthly report is they might want to know how many visits you had, who you visited, things like that. Our program doesn't. Our chief judge does not want that in our court reports. Therefore, it is not in our program's court report, but some programs have it in there. So I always want to make sure you're aware. Case plan progress. So everyone involved in the case, parents, etc., have a case plan tasks. They have certain things they have to do. This is what, if we get these things handled, then we should be able to reintegrate the family, or then we should be able to close the case, whatnot. And so they'll have a lot of tasks. Some of them are really short. They can knock them out. Some of them are longer. Typical case plan tasks that I see on virtually every case. They have to have a housing. Now that doesn't mean they have to have a house or an apartment. It doesn't mean they can't live with a parent or a brother or a sister or something like that. But the parent or parents have to have housing. Another one that you'll typically find on every case plan task for every case is there has to be some sort of income. Now, obviously, most judges will say you have to have a job, but you might have somebody who has disability. They might have a retirement. They might have an income from another source where they don't have to have a job, so to speak. They might own their own business, which is technically a job, but maybe not a job that brings in steady, guaranteed income every week. So they've got to have some kind of income because they got to be able to keep the electricity going, and they have to be able to have running water and, heat in the winter. It gets cold in Kansas. Just saying, it gets cold. You need to stay warm and have running water and different things like that. Another one that I will say that I see on 90% of the cases across the state of Kansas that I have been exposed to, and definitely within my jurisdiction, it's almost 100%, is that there'll be some kind of mental health assessment or therapy. And that would be for any of the parents involved, as well as all the children. Even having a case can be traumatizing to some. And so therapy is typically ordered in every case in my jurisdiction. And 90% of the cases across the state of Kansas would have that as well. The case status, where are we with the case right now, as well, and that feeds into the status of the child. How are they doing? One of the things that we're going to talk about next week is we're going to talk about the whole child, not just an aspect. So how are they doing educationally? How are they doing so educationally or academically? How are they doing socially? How are they doing emotionally? How are they doing physically? And if it's a baby, are they making their milestones and different things like that? So we want the status of the child. And then how are the parents doing? Are they, what case plan tasks have they been able to accomplish? Which ones are they working on? Which ones are they struggling with? So you kind of want to know where we are with the case. The big part, and it will be right near the beginning for our cases, is a recommendation. That's for the best interest of the child, which the best interest of the child in 95% of the cases is also the best interest for the parents and the family as a whole. There are very, very, very few cases where the best interest of the child is not necessarily the best interest of the parents. Those are the cases where we've got the severe abuse, the severe situations. Those are the extreme cases where it is highly unlikely we're going to be able to reunify this family, where it is highly unlikely that that child will ever return home, and we may end up facing a termination of parental rights. Not what we want, not what we strive for, the opposite of what we want, ideally, because for the most part, in the other 95% of the cases, the best interest of that child is to be able to return home to their family of origin. The other thing that you'll have, and we do it, we put issues and concerns kind of at the end of our report, but that is that any concerns you have, you're going to see some court reports as we work through some ones that have been done that we change up so that to keep the confidentiality, where we've expressed what a concern is. You know, CASA Advocate is concerned that the wait list for the parents' Section 8 housing is 6 months, and they are still having to, you know, couch surf at this time, so we can't reintegrate. That's a concern because it's taken a long time, you know, and that might be a concern that you turn into a recommendation that, you know, maybe the contract agency, St. Francis, TFI, KVC, whoever it is for your jurisdiction, can help get them up on the list, maybe, or something like that. So, but that might be a concern. Or a concern that a particular parent is not attending family time, otherwise known as visitation. Now, some programs call it visitation between the parents and the children. Some programs like ours call it family time. So you'll hear both. So those are kind of the key elements of the court report. Any questions on that? Okay, a couple more. Lori, did you have a question? Okay, just making sure. You don't have to have a question. I'm not forcing you to have them, okay? A couple of things. Everything on the court report has to be 100% fact-based. No opinions. No, I believe the only time you can get away with something that is not 100% fact-based is when you have a concern. Because you're stating the fact that you have a concern, that's your fact. But like, it's like, I don't know if this is like, I had a concern that, I'm making one up right now. And everything is, we're going to get into writing them more next week where you'll hear me start to say, like, it's all written in the third person and you don't use any pronouns ever, 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 ever. And so CASA Advocate is concerned that the parents have not been attending family time. So my judge knows that that's visitation, right? And then and I'm going to, in that concern, I'm going to go on, CASA Advocate has concerns that perhaps the reason is that they are using again. The parents are using again. You know, I would make it very court oriented. I'm running it off the top of my head as we go. And so that I'm really clear in what I'm putting in the concern. I'm concerned that it might be the drugs, that they relapsed. That's the word that was not coming to my brain. Again, been up since 3. Ask for a little forgiveness and grace. But that the parents have relapsed, right? I'm not saying that they have. I'm not saying that they're using drugs. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying I'm really concerned that they're missing this family time, visitation time. And that this is right now the only possible thought. This is what my real concern is this is why that they're missing it. And so you see, it's not 100% fact-based. That's the only time we can kind of put that in there. Everything else has to be 100% fact-based.
So that wouldn't be considered like speculation with no like proof.
No. And that's why we have to say CASA advocate is concerned that, because the fact is that that is your concern. And that is why we keep it in a different section. Now, if I was going to do something in the recommendation section, I love people that love to jump ahead. I'm just not going to pull the slide from next week because we'll go over it. But so we'll say CASA advocate recommends that, and let's say, so let's set up a situation where the parent, the case came in because law enforcement came in and there were drugs in the house and there was child there, and then they had to remove the child because the parents were arrested. And now the child, they're trying to get, but it was really unsafe because there were a lot of drugs out there and they were within wherever this toddler could reach and absorb. And there was fentanyl all over the place and the child could crawl in there easily. Okay. So that's our scene. That's our setup. So they've removed the child. Now it doesn't matter if the child is in foster care or kinship placement. They're still out of home placement. And let's say, you know, if I've got parents that were doing really well with family time and they were making a lot of progress and everything was going really, really well. And then all of a sudden, parents are skipping UAs. They're not showing up for family time. Can't get a hold of them. It's like a 180. My first worry, especially if we're dealing with methamphetamines or fentanyl, is that they relapsed. Especially methamphetamine, man, whew, that's horrid. The relapse rate on that one is almost 100%. It's almost 100%. So this is where, if I'm putting it as a concern, I would phrase it like I did before. If I was putting it as a recommendation, I would recommend, CASA advocate recommends that both parents report to court services for a UA, or for a UA immediately upon the conclusion of court today, or by the end of the day today. And the idea is because methamphetamines only stay in the system for 72 hours, and they know that, so they'll stop using 72 hours before, pass the drug test, and then go back to using it. Or I might recommend, CASA advocate recommends that the parents have a hair test. Okay, my judge was really clear the other day. She doesn't want to have it called a hair follicle test because they don't actually test the follicles, they test the hair. So just, we as modern people say hair follicle test, that's what we see on all the television shows. It's really a hair test. Because the parents have missed the last 3 UAs, right? So there's my recommendation. My basis is they missed the last 3 UAs. We don't know if they've had a relapse, you know, and then I'm going to put like 2 or 3 other facts in there to support why I would recommend that. But then I'm not, if you see what I'm doing is I'm recommending a service be done, but I have fact-based reasons. They've missed family time, they've missed UAs, those sort of things. So that's how I get around, or that's how I accurately portray why I'm recommending that. And that's how I would recommend it versus have it as a concern.
Are we getting that information that they've missed those visitations or family time from the child?
So you can find that information from a lot of different places. I mean, if you have an older child, a lot of times they'll tell you, yeah, I haven't seen mom. Or you'll ask the child, so how was your time with mom and dad? Did you do anything fun? And they're like, oh no, they had to cancel. Oh no, that's so sad. And then you obviously change the subject. Placement might tell you, the conversations with the caseworker different, so you could get it. I mean, I've had parents tell me I've had parents tell me they did drugs. So, I mean, you'd be surprised what parents will tell you.
Mhm.
They tell on themselves a lot. They're being truthful. They're like, it is what it is. So, there are a variety of ways that I can find out that they were missing UAs, but typically it's also going to be in the, for us at St. Francis that we have. I am not sure who has what for the other programs. It could be KVC or TFI or whoever the contract agency for your area is. They'll have to include that in their court report. And if they file it in advance, you get a copy of that and you should be able to see it prior to the court hearing. So you might find it out then too.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question though. Okay. So each week, National CASA has us doing a case study. And so let's talk a little bit about what are case studies. So case studies are actual cases that have existed. I will tell you all of these cases happened prior to 2015. So some of the laws have changed on them, and that's okay. When it goes through that way, I always update everybody, so don't worry. They were taken from actual CASA cases, excuse me, across the nation. Obviously, they changed certain items for confidentiality reasons. They renamed things, they might have tweaked something here or there, but they're really based on real cases. Now, a lot of times I'll show court reports for some of the cases that I have had. And when I talk about, like I talked about Spitfire and I talk about the 6-month-old, and you'll see some of those court reports that I wrote, but I'll change the names of everybody. I might change the name of the town. I'll change, you know, if the baby was 6 months old, I might say she was 7 months old. Spitfire was really 6 or 7 years old, but I don't give away anything that would ever potentially breach confidentiality. You can do that without changing the case at all. You could have mom be the one that is the aggressor in the domestic violence situation as opposed to dad. It doesn't necessarily change the case. So, but these are actual cases that they have renamed and done some things so that they can't be identified. And what they'll do is they'll set up the scenario, and these are typically the things that I'll have you like print or put to the side so you can look at but not read through, because there'll be actual interviews and different things in there that we will then kind of learn how to be a CASA with and follow along. But I want that to be really free and natural. And how you find out information and what do we do with that, and kind of take it step by step. So how often will we be doing them? We will be doing the National CASA/GAL's case studies every week. There will be at least one a week. Some weeks we might do 2 depending on time. Most of the time there are a lot of questions and more interactive because you guys are having opinions and stuff like that. So we only do 1. In addition, and it's coming up soon, we are going to do a case that was part of the old curriculum that Texas CASA produced. And here too, they will have hearings on like September 31st, which is a day that does not exist. They will change what they need to change. And they have professional actors come in. The only thing is the judge is the actual judge. And a couple of the key people in it are the actual people. But when it comes to the children and when it comes to the, you'll immediately be able to tell who is a professional actor and who is not. Like the mom in the case and the dad in the case and the children, they're all actors. But you'll be able to tell because you can tell who's really familiar with acting and who's not. It's kind of obvious, but we will use that because there are a lot of things in this particular case study that are very helpful and give us a good amount of talking points and since it's video based, it's even better because you get to see reactions and we can talk about different things, nuances that we can't have with kind of the flat read the story kind of a thing. Okay, now one question that we often get is, why are case studies important if they're not from here in Kansas and they're not updated since 2015, so they don't always have the new laws? And what I will tell you is you're going to still see practical applications from what we've been learning that week. You're also going to see real cases. Learn about real cases. I could teach you all day how to write a court report. I could teach you all day how to interview people and how to build rapport and build trust and communicate. I could teach you about cultural competence and so many other things. But until you put it into practice, it's just head knowledge. And that's one of the things the case studies do, is we start to actually apply what we're learning to the case study. Okay, so what we have here is next, there's a series of 2 videos, and one I'm going to stop at a certain point. The second one I'm going to stop early. And we are going to watch them. Now, my cue anytime we do a video is I would have you to raise your hand or somehow let me know if you can't hear it. I try and make sure that they're loud enough, but so a couple of things. This is from Texas. You're going to see the very first hearing. Now they're doing an ex parte hearing, which you guys all know about because you did the pre-work. That's how their cases start. Our ex partes are typically not done in person, even before, okay? Even before the pandemic, they weren't done in person. Unless it was something highly unusual, they didn't do them in person. It was all done by email and message and reports to the judge and petitions and everything sent that way. It was all done via email and kind of like electronic communications. So, but we're going to kind of watch the start of this case so we kind of follow it along.
Good morning, Judge. This is Investigator Bob Johnson, and he has a new removal to present to you this morning.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. It's nice to meet you. All right. So this is the same affidavit that you faxed in previously?
Yes,
is that correct? All right. Why don't you tell me about the location of the children, where they're placed at this time?
Ben and Robert are placed currently at a shelter. Baby Rose is placed in a foster home.
All right. And have you been looking into placements, relative placements for the children?
Yes, we have.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and appoint Ms. Duke as the attorney and guardian for all the children in this case, and looked like appointment of attorneys for parents would be appropriate as well. And while I'm doing that, why don't you tell me about school issues with the kids and their medications, things such as that?
Ben and Robert will be going to the same school. The shelter will be transporting to that school. Ben will be following up with the doctor for his asthma condition, and all the children will be receiving medical and dentals and eye exams.
All right, so I got the setting for the next hearing in the order here. Ms. Richard, if you'll go ahead and make sure that process gets served to all the parties.
Yes, sir.
Then we'll see you in a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, so we've got it set up. A couple of things. One of the reasons why I'm gonna flip to the next one. A couple of reasons why I show this is because it's the start of how they start the case in Texas, but also a couple of things. You notice that we've had to split children up. That's not unusual. When we have 2 children that are older and an infant, there are very few homes that have those specific openings. A lot of foster care homes have specific openings. They take teenagers or middle school age children, or they take babies and toddlers or things like that. So it's really not uncommon for them to go to different foster homes. Especially the more children you have, the more likely they are to be in different homes. A couple of other things that I want to talk about here is one, you'll notice this is where the attorneys would have been assigned. This is where, so we don't have anybody talking. We don't have the parents there or anything like that. Number 2, in Kansas, we would be doing everywhere we would be doing kinship placement first because of the federal family first legislation. But in Kansas, even before that happened, we would try and keep the children together. And one of the really unique laws that they have here in Kansas is that if you have a step sibling situation, right? So if you have one dad who's the dad of 2 children, we'll say like in this case, and then the baby has a different dad. If the two other children are being, if the two children are going to go to their dad, obviously, that way they wouldn't have to go to foster care or anything like that. That dad has the option of taking the other child, even though he's not the biological father. And that is because they will try and keep the children together. And it is still considered a kinship placement that way because he is related to the family by marriage. And so that is an interesting thing that has happened in Kansas even prior to that federal family first. So in our scenario here, this is one of the reasons why I play this, is because I want to talk about that. If you have two step siblings, they can still be placed together, even if that mom or dad is not the biological parent. Now that's predisposing that the biological parents cannot be placement options for whatever reason. Okay. All right, another thing that I'm going to talk about right now that you're going to kind of hear, and I want to tell you that it's different between Texas and Kansas. In Kansas, we have the statute reads that if they have been in out-of-home placement for 15 of the last 17 months or 17 of the last 22 months, and there is some going back and forth on which way you count them, like you don't start counting till this point, which is why some people say 15 months, and you count from the beginning, it's usually 17 months. But in Texas, they have 1 year. They have 1 calendar year, basically, to have everything done or termination of parental rights, and they move on. And so what I always want to have people here understand is we don't even start to look at, typically, we do not even start to look at whether the case is viable, of reintegration is still viable or not, until we have reached kind of that threshold of how many months they've been in out-of-home care, that 17 months, because once they've reached that, if they've been out of the home 17 of the last 22 months, there is a automatic presumption of unfitness, because you haven't been able to progress to the point where we've been able to reintegrate this family in that much time. That child has to spend a lot of time out of home placement. And so that's going to be a little bit different from what we see in the movie. I may pause it a couple of times just to point out some other things, but let's go. This would be our adjudication hearing. This is what they call an adversary hearing.
This is the 262 hearing, which means it has to happen 14 days after you got the paperwork.
Right through here.
Okay.
It's okay.
So what we're going to do is it's like a mini trial.
Okay, and so again, their days are different. Our adjudication hearing is supposed to happen within 30 days. Theirs has to happen within 2 weeks.
Where we're asking the judge to keep the kids with you, not take them away and give them to CPS.
So I'm basically guilty before proven innocent?
No.
Is that how the system works now? If there's any faith in the court system whatsoever in this universe, then I think that everything will be fine because I am innocent.
Okay. We're going to go in there. We're going to have a hearing. The judge is going to make orders about probably services, things like drug testing or classes that you can do. And you're going to get assigned a CPS caseworker, and you may get assigned something called a CASA advocate who's going to work with you and your family. And the whole reason for this is to put the kids back with you and make sure they'll be safe. When they call us in, let me do as much talking as possible. They may put you on the stand. Are you looking at me? They may put you on the stand. I want you to listen carefully to any questions that are asked.
Do you have something to say? Okay. She's listening to our conversation. Is that legal?
It's okay. What we're going to do is when they call us, we're going to go in there and I will do most of the talking. And if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know. If you have a question, say you need to ask your attorney a question.
Okay.
Okay?
Hi, Bob.
Hey,
My supervisor tells me I'm getting this case.
you are, right. There's 3 children
Okay.
involved. Ben, who's 14.
Okay, so this gentleman would be the equivalent of our DCF worker. That's the investigator that's that determines whether or not they needed to pull the child in. He would be talking to the contract agency. So for our purposes in Kansas, that would be the St. Francis or the KVC worker or the TFI worker. Okay, depending on where. Every region of Kansas has a different contract agency. It's usually one of those three. So they're having that conversation. Okay.
Robert, who's 9, and little Rose, who's 9 months. Mom had left these children home alone at the apartment, and she was arrested for stealing formula.
Okay.
There's some drinking and drugging issues with Mom, and she has a lengthy history with CPS.
Okay.
Ben has asthma, and that wasn't medically treated. There's a suspicion that Rose has was exposed to alcohol prenatally. Both Ben and Robert are behind in school. So we have Ben and Robert in a shelter.
Okay.
Rose is in a foster home right now.
Is that a legal risk home or is
No,
it?
that's not.
It's a regular foster home. Okay.
That's correct. Ben and Robert are going to the same school that they used to. Now, Ben has been treated the day after the removal for his asthma, so that's improving.
Okay.
But he still needs dental and eye exams. He's also missing his dog. That's very important to him. And he thinks the neighbor has him.
Okay.
He's
What's
missing.
the dog's name?
Ralph is a.
Hey, guys.
How are you?
Good. Who's Ralph?
Ralph is Ben's dog.
Okay.
And he misses him terribly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who has the dog now?
We believe a neighbor has that, and we're going to check.
Okay. So are you?
Okay, so the lady who's talking now is the guardian ad litem. So she would be in Kansas, she would be representing the child's legal best interest.
You handing the case off after this hearing?
This is going to go to Teresa.
Yes. Hi, I'm Teresa.
Lori Duke,
I'm gonna
nice
be
to
the
meet you.
conservatorship worker. I'm Barbie Ott with CASA. Nice to meet you, Barbie. And what do y'all know about the case?
I've spoken with Ben. My biggest concern is I think I'm going to need a CASA. He's 14. He's pretty clear on what he wants and doesn't want. And as most teenagers go, his best interest, his legal interest will probably conflict at some point. So I'm going to be asking for a CASA to be appointed.
I agree. Any information about fathers involved?
Right, so there's 2 fathers that we know of, and one is Justin Harris, who is not involved. He has been involved with Ben's life.
Okay.
That's Ben's father. Robert's dad is Ernie, Ernie Price, and he's involved, and he wants Robert. He lives with his mom, and so Ernie has been to Iraq.
Okay.
And he's come back. He has had several deployments. He has PTSD and some medical issues as a result of the war. So he lives with his mom, and we're going to do a home study on them.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, the court is going to call cause number 67432 in the 499th Judicial District Court of San Gabriel County, Texas. This case is styled in the interest of the Harris Price children. We do have several persons present in the courtroom here at this particular time. Let me introduce them and announce who they are for them. On my left here, first of all, we have our attorney ad litem representing the children, Ms. Duke. Next to her, we have Mr. Bob Johnson, our investigator, caseworker from the department. Next to him is our county attorney representing CPS as their attorney, Mr. Britton. Over on my right, we have the mother's attorney, Ms. Langsley, is here with us today. Next to her is the mother in the case, Ms. Price. Good morning, Ms. Price. The court has appointed an attorney to represent the father, Mr. Harris, who has not been served at this particular time. That attorney is Ms. Sparks. She is present with us this morning. Thank you for your acceptance of this appointment, Ms. Sparks. Next to her is Mr. Childress, who's an attorney who's been appointed to represent Robert's father. Mr. Childress is here. We appreciate his time with us today. Next to Mr. Childress is the father, Ernie Price, Robert's father. And I believe this is his mother, Miss Dashi. Is that correct? Next to him. Thank you for being here with us this morning, ma'am. Now, I believe we have other persons from the department, the agency in the audience, as well as CASA in the audience at this particular time. And so those are the persons that we do have present. We are here today for our adversary hearing. My understanding is that There's no agreement in this particular case as to temporary orders, so we will be proceeding with our adversary hearing here in a moment. Thank you for already identifying with the court that service issues have been completed with regards to the two parents who are present. I know we're continuing to seek service on your client, Ms. Sparks, and we may address that later. As we know, paternity has been established, I believe, previously for the older two children, and so we know that Mr. Price is in fact the legal father at this time of the child, Robert. We know that previously a court has adjudicated Mr. Harris as the father of the older child, Ben, so that issue has been resolved. We do know that we have an unknown father. That's my understanding. We have an unknown father alleged for baby Rose, and we'll address those issues momentarily. Those are the issues that the court sees as preliminary issues. I believe all those issues have been resolved at this particular time. We've identified who's here, and I believe at this point we're ready for evidence from the agency. So, Mr. Britton, do you have a witness to call at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. We would call the children's mother, Kathy Price.
All right, Ms. Price, would you scoot out, please, and come have a seat right up here? Thank you, Ms. Price. Will you please raise your right hand to be sworn at this time? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you give before this court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. Will you please have a seat? Now, will you please state your name?
Son of a flip-flop. Okay, this is just gonna be how our day is today. So I'm gonna go like, okay, I was about to pause that and say, in some of these hearings, you'll see everybody sworn in at the same time. That is not how it's done. Typically in Kansas, people will only be sworn in if they are actually testifying, and that's when they're sworn in. So I just want to make sure. So now we have to find who that is. Anybody want to guess whether the lady playing mom is a professional or not?
I think she's a professional.
She is. She does a really good job of
Yeah.
what somebody who's battling alcohol looks like.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
The whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, thank you. Will you please have a seat? Now, will you please state your name for the court?
Kathy Price.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Mr. Britton, do you have questions for this witness at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. Would you just state your name for the record?
Kathy Price.
Ms. Price, do you understand that everything that you say is being recorded today?
Yes, thank you.
And you are the mother of 3 children, Rose, Robert, and Ben, is that correct?
That's right.
Ms. Price, are you okay?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Have you ever been in a courtroom before?
Yeah.
Objection, relevance?
Relevant?
Overruled. Go ahead.
Do you know why we're here today?
Yeah. Because baby formula is too damn expensive. That's why we're here today.
All right, Ms. Price, let me interrupt for a second. Ms. Price, remember that it's important. We're in a court of law, and you need to watch your language, and please don't curse in our courtroom. Will you do that for me, please?
Now that I know that damn is a curse word, I will not say it.
Thank you. Mr. Britton, do you have any other questions for this witness?
Just a few, Judge. Ernie Price is the father of Robert, is that correct?
Yeah.
And Robert's 9 years old?
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is that Mr. Price has actually been out of the country for some period of time, and during that time, Robert was living with you?
Yes.
You also have a 9-month-old baby named Rose.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Now, tell me, who is Rose's father?
I was hoping you could tell me.
Do you not know, or do you not want to tell us?
No, I don't know.
Do you remember the names of the men that you would have been intimate with?
No.
Would that have been because of your substance abuse?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
And assumes facts not in evidence.
You want to ask another question, Mr. Britton?
Do you have an explanation as to why you don't know who the father is?
No.
Are there multiple possible fathers?
I think it works that there's only one. I think that's how it works. I'm really want to move on.
Ms. Price, do you understand how important it is at this point in the process for this court to understand who the father is? Do you understand why I'm asking those questions?
No, because I've been fine this whole time.
Do you understand that?
I've been fine. I've worked it out.
Okay. Do you understand that, much like you were served with papers, the father of each of your children, each of your 3 children, also needs to be served with papers? Do you understand that?
No, I did not know that.
And that this court is going to have to determine who the father of Rose is, so they will know who to serve papers. That's why I'm asking those questions.
Right.
Okay. Well, in the future, if you happen to remember who the father of Rose is, could you notify somebody at CPS?
Sure thing.
Okay. Now, the events of the night that led to the removal of your 3 children, that's what I want to talk about next. Do you remember that night?
I sure do.
Okay. Do you remember what you were doing when CPS came to your home and removed your children?
Yeah.
Okay, where were you? Tell the court where you were actually while your children were being taken from your home.
I was in jail.
And tell the court who is home supervising your 3 children while you were in jail.
My 14-year-old was watching
At the
my
time,
9-year-old in.
Okay, so I'm pausing here. In the state of Kansas, you can have a 14-year-old babysit for a short period of time. Every state is a little different in what the age is, so keep that in mind. And it's also the matter of the amount of time. So for instance, I lived in Georgia. My husband's retired military, and so I lived in Georgia or actually South Carolina. We moved to South Carolina. I had to look up what the rules were, and my 2 girls, so my son would have been 8, which means his next older sister would have been 12, and the one over that, 15. Okay. So the girls could be out of my sight, but had to be within the call of my voice. My son, even at 8, had to be in a direct line of sight at all times. So if they wanted to go to the playground, which was kind of like one house over and in the back, I had to go outside. There was no like them playing in the background while I'm doing dishes. I had to have constant direct line of sight. So rules are different in different places. And I always want to come in. So we've had a case in Geary County before where mom left a toddler and a preschooler locked up in the basement because she couldn't find a babysitter and went to work and was gone for like 9 hours. That's different than if mom had left a 14-year-old in charge of the other 2 and went grocery shopping and was back within an hour. You get what I'm talking about. So I just want to pause sometimes and talk about stuff like that and how it affects us in Kansas, because it's not just she left them. You're going to find out it's how long she left them.
I'm sorry. At the time your children were removed, how long had you been gone from the home?
At the time, they were. Look, all I know is that I went out to go get baby formula, and then I come back from jail, which I didn't even want to go to, and then they took my kids.
Okay. So
That's all I know. I don't know how much time it was. They don't give you a clock in jail.
So you leave your children home, your 3 children home alone, to go get baby formula, correct?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a short amount of time. It's right down the street.
And then you leave the home and go to a store that sells baby formula.
Well, we were out of baby formula and we were out of vodka, so I went in the vodka stores before the baby formula store, so I went there first.
How can I help you?
I want, what's that one that's called like a kamikaze?
You mean Kamchatka?
Show me. Which one is that?
It's I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, right? You want vodka?
Yes. How much is the big one?
Big one's $4.99.
Total? What's?
With tax, $5.40.
All right, I want the bigger one.
All right.
Uh-oh.
You got it all there?
I'm sure I do. I don't know if I can do this anymore. Just wish that I could do more. It is so hard. I gotta go get baby formula.
And so you left your home, you left your 3 kids home alone and went to the liquor store to get vodka, correct?
I stopped by on the way. It's right on the way.
And then after you
3
stopped
minutes.
at the liquor store to get vodka, then you went to the baby formula store? Or the store that sells baby formula?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did she pay for that?
No.
Ma'am. Ma'am, stop. Put your hands behind your back.
And you shoplifted formula and got arrested?
Yeah.
Okay. Your Honor, we have no additional questions. I pass the witness.
Thank you. Ms. Langsley, do you have any questions then for your client?
Yes, Judge, may I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Price, you're the mother of 3 children, right?
Yes.
And throughout their lives, who was the primary parent for those children?
I am.
So you've been the person who's been doing the most caretaking for these kids, right?
Absolutely.
Did you get any help from their fathers?
Rarely.
So who's been providing all of their food?
We get by. I figured it out.
Who's been making sure that they get to school?
I do. Wake up at 5 a.m., make sure baby Rose is okay. And then I get my boys ready for school, and I get them dressed, and then I have to go to work, and then do it all over again the next day.
Who's been making sure that the kids go to the doctor?
Okay, I'm gonna pause it. I gotta figure out how my husband set that up again, and I'm gonna bring it a little further out. Okay, we're just gonna actually stop. So the real thing for this is you've established the case. We know what's going on. You would have been in this hearing. This is at the end. The judge actually appoints the CASA advocate. And so each week we are going to follow this one case very deeply and use it to add to our training because there's a lot more of the nuances that we'll be able to do with this case. So next week, I will have that email sent out for the jot form. And it will either be this evening, probably tomorrow morning, only because my work phone is also going crazy at the same time. So it will probably be tomorrow morning, but one of those two, complete the work on that jot form, and then we will come back next week. Anybody have any questions that you were holding? Nope. All right, well, thank you again for attending. I will see you all next week. All right. It was, Alex wrote that she didn't have any questions. She really enjoyed meeting us all, and we will see you all next week. If you have any questions during the week, please feel free to reach out. Other than that, go enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.